Well, thanks, Mr. President, and welcome everybody to Herndon. I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently probably than you've seen in the past. So I'm going to highlight some things in a little bit more detail, and it's going to be more of a just an open discussion. So when you look at the first vice president right now, which is me, it's a little bit different role that you've probably seen in the past when Joe was the first vice president or when Sean was. Joe's got me leading the international agenda of the association. And then I've also turned over the National Safety Coordinator job, which has me working with engineering and air safety along with the Air Safety Organization. And those both tie into government affairs. So I've been working very closely with Elizabeth Baker, the director of our government affairs team as well. And then input into this circle, of course, is the Economic and Finance Analysis Department along with legal. Legal is helping me a lot in the international world, working primarily with 4 of their attorneys, and they've been doing a fantastic job supporting me. So let's start with the international front. There's an organization called Center for Aviation, CAPA, and they run events throughout the year talking about global aviation and where it's going. I recently had a chance to go to one in Berlin at the end of December, and at the end of the year, they recognized the CEO of the year. So in this conference in December in Berlin, they recognized the Wizz CEO, it's a Hungarian airline, and the guy's name is Josef Velarde. So he gets up on the stage and he has a slide deck, and his slide deck starts out with this basically is that he's all about high productivity with the employees. He's all about low cost, low fares, and highest margins. How is he going to get there? So his next slide is this, the future of flying, what's next for air travel? Robotic pilots. So when he gets to this slide, he goes, you know what? Millennials don't care how this works. They really don't. They just know it works. That's what they're going to think about airplanes too in the future. They don't care how the airplane works. We got 2 robotic pilots up there flying. We're good to go. That's what this guy's about. That's what this organization recognized, right? So he feels like with this model, he's going to grow from 100 Airbuses to 300 by 2030. He's going to go from $300 million in profit to $1 billion. That's what he's focused on. That's what he's pushing. He believes the lowest cost will prevail. So as we look at this threat, and this threat's coming at us, this technology, what are we going to do about it? Well, last year in the spring of 18, this board approved $1 million from the MCF to fight the language that was in the FAA reauthorization bill that talked about doing a study looking at this with the FAA. We've spent about $750,000 out of that allocation. We have about $250,000 left, and we're going to use that moving forward. I'm overseeing a working group that's been put together to do this work. We found out that NASA has actually money that they're using to look at this technology. So we've engaged with this. We've got ourselves into those meetings, and we're going to set a schedule to where when these discussions are going on, we're going to be in the room and being part of the discussion. In addition, we've developed a white paper that we're going to roll out, the Air Safety Forum, that talks about why this is a problem. We've got our government affairs team, they're looking at stopping future funding for this kind of study at this point in time. And then we've got representation. Betty Ginsburg department is looking at improving everybody's agreement to get language in there about having the airplane having 2 qualified pilots up there in the cockpit. As Joe stated, we went to IFALPA, working along with Tim Perry and his team, and we basically were able to get IFALPA to make a conference statement about this issue. And that's a hard thing to do when you look at IFALPA and all the member associations that are part of IFALPA to come together to agree that this is the right thing to say and take a stance on it. And as you look at IFALPA and the relationship of IFALPA with ICAO, so IFALPA basically is located in Montreal. That's where ICAO is located at. ICAO is what basically conducts policies or makes policy doing with the international agenda that we operate underneath. So if you look at IFALPA, we have 100 member associations in IFALPA, over 100,000 pilots, okay? We've got 2 member association chief delegates in this room right now. Captain Pete, Captain Perry. They represent the US and Canada. which, by the way, they represent over 62,000 pilots. So you can kind of see how the dynamic plays out in IFALPA. IFALPA has a technical side of it. Technical side is dealing with training, flight qualifications, aircraft design. Then it has an industrial side of it called the professional government affairs side of it. And they deal with industrial issues like flight of pay schemes, atypical employment, transnational airlines. Congratulations, by the way, to Captain Sherry. I saw him in the room. He's the new Executive Vice President of the Professional Government Affairs Division of IFALPA, and also Captain Rick Cameron, who is also took over for Rod Lipchick, who's in the room. He's the Administration, Finance, and Membership Executive Vice President. When you look at ICAO and the work they do, the biggest piece in ICAO that actually has their stuff together, and this was confirmed last week when we were with the U.S. Ambassador to ICAO, is the Air Navigation Commission. The Air Navigation Commission looks at policy and changes policy, makes recommendations for changes to policy that then goes to the overall organization. If you don't have a panel working under the Air Navigation Commission to do that work, you're going to go into the political side of ICAO, which he described as not a good place to be. So, as Captain Pete said, he sent a letter to the Secretary General. Here she is, Dr. Feng Yu, and she's from China. Okay, and she's an attorney, and she negotiated all the China agreements that they've recently done before taking over this job. She has the ability to put together a task force that's outside of the Air Navigation Commission, and that's what she currently has done. And in that task force she put together, they actually recommended reducing the MPL requirements. Of 240 hours, let's just take it down to no hours in the airplanes. Let's do a competency-based system. That got shot down, thank God. But that's what happens when you go outside into this task force world, working directly underneath her instead of the Air Navigation Commission. Our objective, basically, is to look at the training and flight qualifications worldwide, right? While we're maintaining our own first officer qualifications. But let's look at that worldwide and let's try to make an improvement on that. Let's get a panel put together now with everything going on, and let's seriously look at what's going on out there in the world. That's our objective. In July, they're going to sit down and look at this, and we're going to be up there trying to put a panel together underneath the Air Navigation Commission. There's also two new working groups that IFALPA has put together. One is Women in Aviation. Currently, for the U.S. delegate team, we got Ellen Brinks, as Joe mentioned, our air medical chair. And I think Tim Perry is looking for a member from his member association to join this group as well. They've also put a working group together on cargo to look at everything that basically Joe was talking about internationally. I'm going to go into a little bit more details about this. January 2018, the Trump administration reaches an agreement with Qatar, okay? Then 3 or 4 months later, in May, they reach almost the same agreement with the UAE. So we're basically on the year anniversary of these agreements right now. And what do the agreements say? One, they acknowledge that subsidiaries directly affect fair competition. Number two, they basically committed to financial transparency and operating underneath commercial terms. Okay? And then number three, they basically said, hey, we have no more plans to conduct Fifth Freedom Rights, which are basically flights from Europe to the United States, would be an example of Fifth Freedom Flight. Now, this is an agreement, and I want to make sure that you understand there's been no discussion that it's not an agreement. The agreement is in place, even though there's been talk about a side letter. These agreements are written down, and they're in place. Now we're in the enforcement side of the agreement. All the work we're doing right now is to ensuring that these agreements are being enforced, because what occurred is Qatar went right out and, in our opinion, blew off the agreement. They went and acquired 49% stake of an Italian airline called Miranda. Miranda was going out of business. It was flying small airplanes. I think at the time they had like 14 or so small airplanes. Qatar rebranded it Air Italy. Then their initial plan that they communicated was they're going to take their own order book and they're going to put 27 37 MAXs in this operation and 37 87s. In the meantime, while they were doing that and getting those orders showing up on the Qatar property, they began transferring airplanes, their own airplanes, A330s, over to Air Italy, repainting them and flying them from New York, Miami, Los Angeles, San Francisco to Milan. not only is that like a fifth freedom violation, you could almost say that's a seventh freedom violation because they're just flying from Milan to the States and back and forth. That's what's going on. And here's the slide that Joe's talking about. This aircraft serial number 638, okay, there it is in September 2018. And there's the same airplane painted in November 2018. A lot of the people in the administration like pictures. This picture is playing out really well, okay? And I'm going to get into that a little bit more. But this picture says it all in one statement on what's going on there. If you haven't seen, I just saw in the news this week, they've decided not to use the 37s and the 787s. They're just going to take all of their A330s and they're going to move them over to Air Italy and be an Airbus A330 airline. So we have support in the Senate. They've written to Commerce, Transportation, State. Senator Cruz is behind this initiative for us, asking the Trump administration to look into this. Then we also in Congress, the same thing. We've got Peter DeFazio, Transportation Infrastructure, doing the same thing, asking for a hearing on these initiatives. Okay. Besides Congress, we have the partnership. The partnership is United Management, Delta Management, American Management, unions like ALPA, APA, the Association of Flight Attendants, that we're working collaboratively together on this initiative too. And this is basically a result of that.
We will stand up to trade cheating anywhere and everywhere it threatens the American job.
Now, 1.2 million jobs and the U.S. airline industry are at risk because Mideast carriers pump billions in illegal subsidies into their airlines. President Trump took action to stop the trade cheating, but Qatar continues to break the rules. Thank you, President Trump. America's airline workers are counting on you to enforce our trade agreements.
So that's what's going on there. Let's talk about Transnational Airlines for a little bit. So you got a company, SAS, okay? SAS operates with 3 different pilot bases, okay? One in Stockholm, one in Oslo, and one in Denmark. 3 different pilot bases in 3 different countries, one airline. That's a transnational airline, okay? If you go back 3 or 4 years and you talk to these pilots, they all had individual contracts with SAS. SAS started playing them off each other. They said, hey, listen, we want some concessions down in Denmark. Denmark said, okay. And they moved flying down there. And then they just started eroding everybody's contract. They finally came together about 2 years ago and they said, well, this has to stop. And they put together a team that says, we're one pilot group even though we're in 3 different countries. And that's who you're going to negotiate with, okay? They had to go out on strike when we were in Berlin for the ALPA conference. In this kind of world, it's not a strike for a day and go back to work. No, we're out, just like we're out here. What you've experienced, at Spirit. We're out. We're going to stand firm on this line. And they did for 7 days. And they got an agreement. And what really was important in their agreement was their job protection language. That was the #1 priority for them. That's what it took. But that shows you where pilots need to go when you're talking about transnational airlines. Let's talk about where pilots need to get away from. This is Ryanair. Okay? These are all the bases that Ryanair has and operates out of. Okay? The Ryanair pilots have not been unionized. Okay? That's the first thing to understand. They're about the size. They're about 5,000 pilots. Okay? So if you just look at those 5,000 pilots internally, 60% of those pilots operate underneath an atypical employment model. They operate by themselves, okay, with some kind of sole proprietor, we would call on here sole proprietor, and they get their paychecks from something like NAC Inc., okay? And there's no taxes taken out of this paycheck, okay? It's just, here's your paycheck. Let's talk about what they fly under. They fly under a 0-hour contract. That's what they fly under, okay? They go to work, they sit reserve for 5 days, and they don't fly. They get no money. And they're picking up their expenses while they're sitting there waiting to go fly. 0-hour contract. That's 60% of those guys. Ryanair recently reached agreement that they're going to recognize the union. Who are they recognizing? They're recognizing what they call the experienced pilots. Those are the guys, the 40% that are not part of this 60% group. Okay, unfortunately, when you're trying to negotiate like this, you have these countries like Ireland have 3 pilot bases that you're trying to bring those bases together to let's get together and let's negotiate what we think is the common good here. In addition, you have places like Germany, same thing, all negotiating with the same company. Okay. There was a good piece that came out of Germany recently because German law says that you cannot operate with these individual contracts with pilots. If you're going to have pilots for Ryanair in Germany, they have got to be working for Ryanair. Their taxes have got to be taken out, and you need to pay your bills, and their checks need to say Ryanair. That just happened. In the meantime, they're also negotiating things, just basic things right now. They got a seniority list finally, so when they get transferred around to the bases, they can move. But now they're talking about, let's put together a common pay scheme for the entire group. Let's put together a common bidding, PBS, what you would call bidding scheme as well. You know, and that is the situation going on there. This union, ALPA, we are supporting these guys with our resources. I want you to know that. That started about a year ago from this period of time. We're supporting them. We're trying to get this model fixed. We don't want this model coming overseas. We don't want these guys getting maxes or something else, and now they're competing with us across the Atlantic underneath this model. So like Joe says, stop forum shopping, stop social dumping. Let's get this solved, and we're working on that. Don't know if you remember this picture. This was a fight a couple years ago about the flag convenience model with NAI. Now, I think everybody in the room realizes that the NAI itself has kind of gone away. They closed the pilot bases in the U.S. They're in financial trouble. But this needs to get solved, we think, and it needs to be legislative through a mandate, a law. And so we had H.R. 2150 last year that had four co-sponsors, Frank Lobiando, Peter DeFazio, Rick Larson, and Drew in Georgia. They got together and they said we need to define flag convenience and we need to stop it. And we also need to tell the Department of Transportation that they must consider the public interest when they're looking at these foreign air permits. So this got through the Congress, it went over to the Senate, and at the last minute, this was one of the last things that was ripped out of the FAA reauthorization bill. So we're working right now to get this language up and going. We think we're going to have the bill on the floor by the time we get to the legislative summit. We just met with APA and SWAPA to agree on language together. Peter DeFazio, who is now the chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, says, if you guys all agree on language, just get it to me and I'll get it out there as a bill. That's where we are with that. And what happened to Frank Lobiando? Well, Frank Lobiando, he retired. Okay, he's no longer working in the Senate. He started his own company called Lobiando Strategies, and we went out there and we asked him to go to work for us, and we got him on board. So he's working for us now. He's helping us out immensely in this Air Italy piece right now. He's got contacts that we're utilizing to get that picture that I showed you into the right hands. He's also helping us with strategy on how to attack the problem, and when we get the flag convenience thing up and running, he's going to help us there as well. Okay, changing subjects. Schedule with safety. So this is an interesting picture. I was recently at an event. Okay, this is a picture of about 11 o'clock in the afternoon about a month ago. And what you're looking at is you're looking at space-based ATSB. And these are all the airplanes flying around at that particular time, 11 o'clock a couple weeks ago. And this company called Aviation, who's up in the upper left-hand corner, they have got 66 satellites up orbiting the Earth that are collecting this data off of our airplanes. And currently, airplanes are being controlled over the Nats, up in Canada, and a little bit further south, right now are being controlled with this technology. It's not in the US yet, but it's coming, okay? What I really thought was interesting about this is where the white dots are at and where they're not at. And notice they're not here, okay? That's the Persian Gulf. That's where those 3 carriers live. They're not there. So as the National Safety Coordinator, basically there's 4 different specialties in that role at the ASO. You have safety, jump seat, security, and pilot assistance. They all have outstanding chairs running each one of those divisions that I'm proud to work with. They're all great people, and the whole organization is filled with good people. During this week, I've asked Joe, instead of me talking about some of the stuff they're doing, we're going to ask two of them to make presentations to you on what they're actually working on. That's safety and security this time. Jump seat and pilot assistance, I'm going to cover real quick. So pilot assistance, we've hosted the first cabin air quality roundtable talking about the issues there. We've engaged Congress. Senator Blumenthal has a bill on the floor along with Congressman Jeremy Maldi. We're fighting hard on this issue. Even though some people want to say it's not an issue, we know it's an issue. Pilot peer support has 90 volunteers, as Joe talked about. We have our next class has 30 more signed up to do that. CRP has responded has responded to foreign airlines that are having issues going on in this country. They're routinely answering the call on those questions, helping those pilots get back into the cockpit, get over the experience that they had and all the good work that they do in that world. And then HIMSS, you can see they conducted advanced training recently of 205 attendees. You can see who was there. You know, medical professionals, pilots from other airlines. All good work going on in the pilot assistance world. And finally, we have a forum this year because it's an off cycle to the BOD, and that forum is next week here in town. On the jump seat side, there's been a lot of questions to our jump seat committee people here and the experts on how they do it and how we get it done internationally. So we're going to reach out to ALPA and ask them to stand up a jump seat working group. They're also working very hard on Joe's initiative to get this app updated with real-time information on the jump seat. And they're putting a lot of time in that, and I think it's going to turn out great from what I've seen. They're working with TSA to update the crew manifest so we can do international jump seat as well. And then finally, they're working with government affairs to figure out that we can put together legislation that we can actually, do something meaningful with people trying to get into our cockpits that they shouldn't be there. Can we do something to kind of stop that bad behavior? So this is a calendar of June, and this is an initiative that's been in place since March. And what I've asked is I've asked our jump and our air safety organization leadership to come into Herndon and work, at least try to have 2 guys in there every week helping me out. Okay, and so you can see how the calendar's played out in June. You have safety at the top. I've got 4, they're covering every week, basically. Security is doing 3 out of the 4 weeks. Pilot assistance is doing 1, and jump seat's doing 1. This is invaluable. There are things that pop up every single day around here that these guys are jumping on working with engineering and air safety. Whether you're dealing with the MAX, whether you're dealing with pilots that are flying over the White House, things are popping up all the time. And these guys they're carrying the load, and they're the experts, and they're doing fantastic work. I can't tell you how excited I am to work with them on a daily basis and see engineering air safety and them working together. So we're going to continue this. So let me talk a little bit what Joe's talking about, the DART program, how we're going to move the union forward. So the DART program, it's a platform that's been built off of the United platform called the Pilot Data Reporting System there. IT has been working on the programming of updating that since about January, I think. They've finished, which is, I'm just so happy about that. The staff in the IT world has done a great job moving this initiative forward. So we're calling it a data action report, and we're asking pilots to throw a dart to ALPA. Reach out to your union with your issue, and we're going to help you out. So the goal here is to support MBCs, like we've talked about, that are having high turnover with their volunteers and making sure all of our members have the full service of this union. And the first thing it's going to do, it's going to provide pilot engagement. The line pilot is now going to have a way to reach into the union and get his issue answered. When he gets that issue answered within a day, he's going to go, hey, the union's there. It's backing me up. It's supporting me. Okay? Pilot engagement. The second thing it's going to do is education. So when the subject matter expert answers the report, the other subject matter experts in that field get copied in on that answer. So they can basically see if the answer is correct, do a little quality assurance. Also, if they didn't realize that was the correct answer, they've educated themselves. The other people that get copied in on this report are his representatives, the pilot's representatives, local representatives get copied in on this. Now they see Okay, my local guy here just asked this question. He just got this answer, and I didn't even know that was the right answer, but now I'm educated. The other people that get copied in are the MEC officers, so there's education going on as well of what's going on system-wide in their airline. The next piece is data collection. All of this data is put in the background now that you can go get to. You can get to the question and you can get to the answer, and you can sort it however you want to sort it to attack whatever issue you have, and you can de-identify it by taking the pilot's names off of that or phone numbers very easily, and then putting it into a spreadsheet that you need to engage management with maybe, or your chief pilot, who knows. That data is all in the background. And then finally, it's about enforcement. This is a tool that we can now enforce our agreements. And we can also figure out, hey, if the language didn't really, if we didn't think the language did what we thought, we can then take that and go into the next negotiations and fix it. So where are we at? So phase one, what I like to call phase one, is we're going to start with the Group B1. And the EVPs are going to oversee all of their airlines that they represent in this system. So they'll see what's going on in all their different airlines as well. So Sean's Creed Group, we're starting there. We started with PSA, okay? And I've been meeting around the system when I can to talk about it a little bit more in detail to see if the MECs want in or out. I haven't met an MEC yet that doesn't want into this program. When I do meet with them, we need to figure out where are your pilot volunteers? Where do you have support? PSA, they have professional standards volunteers. They don't need help there. But in the scheduling side of the house, they need help with 117 questions. Okay, you need help with 117 questions? We're going to use our flight time, duty time chairman, Brian Noyes. We're going to put him into the system so Brian can answer those questions. Okay, contract questions, we're going to put the representational attorney that's assigned to PSA into the system so that the attorney knows what's going on and can answer the questions and support those volunteers. That's where we are. Once we get PSA up and running, and because they're the first ones, it's probably going to be a little while in the testing. My hope is to turn it on by June, Steve, is when I'm hoping to do that. Communications is helping with a video so that you'll have a video to send out to the pilots to know how to use the system. And we're going to just start marching our way through everybody that wants part of it. And here's the banner for the PSA pilot group, Data Action Report. Okay, ALPA PAC. I'm the treasurer of the ALPA PAC based on my job as the first vice president. Let's talk about that for a little bit. We had the best year ever last year. We raised over $2.38 million. So right off the bat, I want to say, those of you that are contributing to the ALPA PAC, thank you for doing that. It makes a difference. Thank you for contributing to the ALPA PAC. The next thing I say is those of you that aren't contributing to the ALPA PAC, I need you to start contributing to the ALPA PAC. There's my ask. Let's collectively try to raise our participation rate. When you look at this chart, this is all the unions out there, and this is where their money goes in their PACs. Whether you're operating engineer, painters, Teamsters, you can see heavily Democratic distributions. And here we are with currently, we're giving 55% to the Democratic Party, 45% to the Republican Party. You also have to understand that a lot of this, that ratio back and forth depends on how many members of how many members of Congress are from one party or not. Right now we have a heavily Democratic majority. If you go back a few years when the Republicans were in the majority, this was flipped around a little bit. But that's kind of where we are. And we're looking for pilot partisan candidates, and that's who we contribute to. And it pays off. This was an event that we went to, okay, this spring, the National Republican Committee dinner. President Trump talked for 2 hours. That's kind of where we were, sitting on the table, right next to the stage because of our PAC dollars. At the table, okay, Joe brought his good friend, John Duncan, okay, who is President Trump's pilot, sitting at the table with us. We also had a folder with that picture that I talked about before, with the Air Italy picture where you had the Qatar aircraft and then you had the Air Italy aircraft. We gave it to him. We educated him on what was going on, and we asked him to take it to the president. Okay, that's the access that we get through the PAC. I also had an opportunity to go to a small event with the new speaker. I think there was like maybe 15 people in the room there. Very small setting, and we were in the room based on our PAC dollars that we provide to the pilot partisan candidates out there. discussing our issues. So that's what the PAC's about. And like I said, collectively, I know some people are doing really, really good out there with their initiatives. And if you need any discussion on what you're doing on the different properties, I would encourage you to talk to each other about that. Also, we have some United pilots here this week. If you have any questions about the reporting system that we're turning on, they would be some good people to talk to as well. With that, I'll say thank you, and I will let everybody know these last 4.5 months, it's been a great pleasure for me to work with the new officer team and Russ in the back and all the staff and getting to know everybody. So thank you very much.